Welcome back. You're watching To The Point. Whilst we in India believe Prime Minister Narendra Modi's meeting with his Pakistani counterpart went off well, the view in Pakistan is not necessarily the same. Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif returned to substantial criticism both from the opposition as well as the Pakistani media. With me to try and understand how the visit has been viewed in Pakistan and how the Pakistani opposition believes the relationship with India should hereafter go forward is the former Foreign Minister of Pakistan, Hina Khar. Ms. Khar, let's begin with the comments made by Mr. Nawaz Sharif whilst he was still in India before he returned. He described his conversation with Mr. Modi as warm and cordial. He called his visit a historic opportunity. Separately, he said it had been an excellent visit. Would you, as a former foreign minister, agree with that characterization, or would you separate yourself from that view?
Karan, I think what is happening in Pakistan within the Pakistan-India domain is quite interesting, and it's also quite exciting, and it leaves a lot of room for healthy optimism. Because if you remember, a similar invitation came from the other side of the border from Dr. Manmohan Singh on the swearing-in ceremony of Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif. However, Dr. Manmohan Singh could obviously not take that invitation.
Can I quickly clarify? Yeah. In fact, Dr. Manmohan Singh lets out that whilst he was invited on the phone personally, no formal invitation came.
Because I guess, how diplomacy works. The indication was most probably that he was not coming, and maybe therefore. What I was trying to say was, why was Manmohan Singh not able to come to Pakistan and Nawaz Sharif was able to come to India? I believe it has to do with the role of a healthy opposition in Pakistan, and an environment in Pakistan where the opposition does not believe it is worthwhile to play politics on India.
You're a good politician. You're claiming credit for the fact that the Prime Minister of Pakistan came, and you're actually suggesting that it was the opposition in India that didn't let Dr. Manmohan Singh go. Let me put this to you. There is a view in your country that in fact this was not an opportune time for the Pakistan Prime Minister to come to India. First of all, there is the floundering peace talks with the Taliban and the sense of tension and uncertainty that's created. And then there is the low ebb in the relations with the army, particularly after the GeoTV problem. Do you share the view that this was not an appropriate, propitious time for a visit?
No, absolutely not. And I don't think it would be fair to say that there was a view in Pakistan, because, who's representing Pakistan? I believe the Parliament of Pakistan, by and large, is representing Pakistan. The Parliament in Pakistan is the government, and we, as the biggest opposition party, were supportive of the visit even before Nawaz Sharif accepted it. So we actually enabled, in some ways, Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif to be able to accept this invitation.
You gave him the strength to come to India, which perhaps otherwise he might not have had, particularly with several elements of the media suggesting he ought not to go. You're claiming credit for that?
Oh, certainly. I mean, I'm claiming credit for all of the real opposition, because, typically I see in India, Pakistan is seen to be represented by the fringe minority of extremist groups, and you consider them to be representing the viewpoint of the majority of Pakistan, which is clearly not the point.
We both make that mistake with each other, don't we? We take your fringe minority groups, particularly because they're allowed on television as if they're representative of the country. You take ours because they're allowed on our television as representative of India. But let's leave that apart.
Sure.
I believe that, in fact, we ought now to concentrate on the nature of the visit and what happened, because that's really where your Prime Minister faced a lot of flack when he returned. To begin with, before we come to the substance of their talks, do you believe the two men hit it off? There were those two long, effusive handshakes. There was the story about the exchange with each other's mothers. There was the shawl that our Prime Minister sent back for your Prime Minister's mother. Do you think they've established a rapport, or is that over-reading the tea leaves?
No, I think it would have been, if I can undiplomatically say, stupid to let this opportunity go by. Because within the Pakistan-India context, you have to be proactive and not reactive. And you have to grab opportunities if you're not unable to take initiatives. Ideally, you would like to take initiatives. So I believe, and my party also believes, that this was the right thing to do. Because within the South Asia context, personalities do make a lot of difference, right? So in a good gesture, a similar good gesture was returned by him coming in. So an opportunity was created for the two leaders to be able to develop a bit of a rapport. And then,
do you think they have developed that rapport?
I think clearly. I mean, you cannot really develop a deep understanding in a small meeting. But the typical impression that Prime Minister Modi had in Pakistan was pretty much taken care of for the positive through the handshake. And till the handshake and till the meeting, until after the meeting, till before your Foreign Secretary gave the press briefing, things were pretty good in Pakistan.
I'll come to the Foreign Secretary's press briefing in a moment, because that in a sense is about the nature of the talks they had.
Sure.
But do you think the way he received Nawaz Sharif has changed the way Narendra Modi is perceived in Pakistan?
I think it certainly did, for the time being, right? Because everything is very short in terms of any optimism that can arise within this context. But it certainly did. The gesture of inviting him, a lot of people said, oh, this was done to make sure that his irreputable past maybe was to be cleansed, etc. Whatever the reasons were. An opportunity was provided and it was grabbed, and I think that's good for both.
So as a result of which, today Narendra Modi is viewed substantially differently.
Absolutely.
Pakistan is in a sense more receptive to him. Pakistan believes, or am I overreading again, that Mr. Modi is someone they can do business with.
The Pakistan that I represent certainly believes that, yes.
Now, one of the reasons why your Prime Minister got criticized, particularly by certain elements of your opposition and certainly by your media, is because he didn't meet Hurriyat. His explanation is that this was a ceremonial visit. He was barely here for 24 hours. There wasn't time, and it probably would have been wrong to meet Hurriyat. How does that answer work with you?
Look, I'm of the view that typically one should get out of, the stated positions and what one must do, what one must not do within this context, because let's leave some space and room to be able to maneuver around. If he could have, he should have. I don't think there's anything wrong with meeting the Hurriyat at all, because Kashmir is,
But not meeting Hurriyat is a minus point in your eyes?
Meaning, if he was going in for a meeting, ideally it should have just been a ceremonial visit where he could have just attended in order to make sure that he didn't get the flack that he got. But that he had the meeting was also fine. So I think typically we look for reasons to downplay any good thing that happens.
I'll tell you why I mentioned the Hurriyat thing, because Imran Khan has actually tweeted that Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif found time to attend a tea party at a steel magnet's home where he met Indian actors but didn't meet the Hurriyat, and he's been criticized by Imran. You don't share that viewpoint, do you?
No, as I'm saying, it's typically the case that a Prime Minister or Foreign Minister or whoever is coming does meet. So to keep that protocol, it might have been well advised to go ahead and do that. But I would not overly judge the situation at this point where the next Prime Minister is just being sworn in.
Now, the second reason he faced a lot of flack when he returned home is because when he made that statement, he didn't mention Kashmir. But the truth is, he didn't mention terror either, which is the issue of great concerns to India. What he said was that issues of importance to both sides were discussed. Is that not a sufficient formula to cover both?
You know, Karan, now on this one, if you'll give me some time, right? How do we manage this impossible relationship? We manage it by creating mutual space for each other. So if I want to get my goals and objectives, I have to create space for you within your domestic environment to be able to also function and operate within that environment and to be able to, do business with me. So within that context, I think it was a mistake on his part, first of all, to do a solo press reading. It wasn't even a press briefing, right? So if his counterpart was not there standing next to him, he should have ideally avoided it, had his foreign secretary, foreign minister, foreign advisor to the on foreign affairs do it. I personally think it was a mistake. And if he were doing it, the expectation in Pakistan was the only reason he was doing it because he wanted to mention Kashmir, which he avoided or did not do. So that was ill-advised, I would say. I think
So having chosen to do a press conference, which he shouldn't have done, then choosing not to mention Kashmir was like actually giving the game away.
It actually almost did give the game away, because it was really from the press briefing of your foreign secretary onwards to his press talk that everything went in the opposite direction. Before that, believe me, even the Pakistani media, which is as viral as yours, was relatively positive.
But do you really believe the argument that because he didn't formally mention Kashmir by name, Kashmir wasn't discussed? He insists, and Sardar Aziz insists, that Kashmir was discussed, although the truth is, and I should point this out, our foreign affairs sources are leaking that in fact Kashmir wasn't raised in any substantive way.
Look, now these are interesting things. Was not raised in any substantive way, then was it raised in an unsubstantive way? These are all, the gimmickry that we're all very well aware of. The truth is that what you discuss or do not discuss, you have to manage the public opinion. And that is an important part of diplomacy. You cannot do diplomacy without creating what I call mutual space and managing public opinion. That's the foremost.
So in fact, the charge you're making, if I can use that word, against Nawaz Sharif is that A, he was ill-advised to go in front of the media when there was no similar gesture by the Indian Prime Minister. B, when he did go in front of the media, he was unable to manage public opinion. And C, as a result of which, the goodwill gesture of coming across, of looking supportive, looking as if he was reaching out and responding to a gesture from Mr. Modi, completely fell apart, because then critical issues that he should have handled from Pakistan's point of view looked as if they had been left unhandled or mishandled.
You're obviously going to the extreme side of it. I would not say a charge. I'm saying I'm giving my assessment of how it should have been played out. But even then, even being mishandled to quite an extent, I would still say that the opportunity should not have been let go of. I'm glad that he grabbed this opportunity, and I hope that he will find the courage to grab many more.
Now, there are 2 or 3 substantive outcomes as viewed in India of these talks. I want to now come and talk about those. First of all, it's believed that your Prime Minister suggested at that 50-minute meeting that resuming the dialogue was important, but Pakistan was no longer insisting on the composite structure. He was happy for a new architecture. And if you look at the language the Indian Foreign Secretary used afterwards, she said that the 2 foreign secretaries would meet or get together to explore the way forward. That does suggest that at their first meeting, they may well try and devise a new architecture, and then having established it, there will be talks along that lines. Do you see that as a way forward? Many in India thought it was a significant step.
You know, Karan, it's very interesting how this relationship is bogged down by nomenclature and architectures and processes. You know, we get so bogged down with it that we forget what the real aims and objectives are. And really, do we ever ask ourselves, is it not mutually beneficial for both the countries to allow each other space to be able to move on with the job of, you know, with doing business to normalize relations, and then eventually, because, you know, normalizing, why are we obsessed with the idea of normalization of relations? Because it is a prerequisite to be able to resolve our issues with each other.
Absolutely.
Right?
But this new idea, come up with the new architecture so that you can resume dialogue, is not that an essential part of normalizing what has been stalled since effectively January 2013?
You know, as far as I'm concerned, if it can address the issues which are required to be addressed from both sides, not from one side. Because remember, if you're looking for a win-win, you are losing, right? Because if I think that I can win this out of India, I'm ensuring that I will not win it because India will not let me, and vice versa. So we have to create a win-win. You know, I'll give you an example. In Pakistan, I was asked, oh, but you know, they won on this one. I said, why are you looking at it as a zero-sum game? You know, it's we can both win from its given situation.
So this talk of a new architecture, if it happens, is a pudding that has to be proven in the eating. At the moment, it's simply a small step forward in terms of process, not in terms of substance.
And if you're going to significantly change the architecture and waste the next 2 years in coming up with the architecture, I would consider it to be 2 steps back.
Something else that emerged from this talks, but this time it happened more in terms of what your Prime Minister said in meetings rather than at the formal meeting with Mr. Modi, is that Pakistan was ready to extend NDMA, non-discriminatory market access status to India. And again, people look at what our Foreign Secretary said, and when she says India was ready, or both countries were ready to resume full trade relations, they believe this is hinted at. Do you believe that NDMA status is something Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif can actually readily give, or is it just talk on his part?
You know, interestingly, again, a question of nomenclature. As you remember, this was MFN, which is now NDMA, and we, you know, love to talk about these difficult acronyms. However, you know, the reality is that currently in Pakistan, the MFN or the NDMA status has already in the books, through a cabinet approval, been given to India since December 2013. Okay, so January 2014.
But not actually given
However,
in fact.
And this is something that the Pakistan People's Party government did. And the first step required us to go from a positive list to a negative list, which you will agree with me was a big step and happened after 40 years. I believe it is entirely possible from Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif to be able to finally do it.
He would have PPP support if he bites that bullet.
You know, he's had PPP support on normalization of all types of relations with India. Very consistent and almost persistent support.
So if there's a lingering problem, it's his own hesitation, not any lack of support from PPP.
From the opposition, he has, I mean, if you consider us to be the major opposition, which we are, Imran Khan obviously is quite a different animal. And so, you know, that...
Now, the big issue from the Indian standpoint, and it's a question not just of frustration for Indians, but it's probably a sticking point with Mr. Modi in particular because of the way he views the matter, is terror-related issues. First, there is the 2611 case. Judges have changed 6 times, the court has changed twice, the prosecutor was assassinated, and barely 25 of the 160 prosecution witnesses have deposed. The case has been dragging on for pretty close to 6.5, 7 years. Can you understand the incredible frustration in India?
Yeah, but I encourage you to try and understand the incredible frustration in Pakistan on the Samjhauta Express, where if I had my numbers as well as you do, we would have a similar number of prosecutors and changes of cases and etc. However, what we have to understand is that we need to move away from the past and move forward, right? If you're going to let the past hold us back forever, 2611, I had believed while I was foreign minister, and I believe so today, it is in Pakistan's interest to resolve that issue, solve that case once and forever, so we can not have that as a sticking point between the two nations.
But you know,
however, the judicial system in your country is very similar to ours. So you should be able to better understand that this is not something that the government can give on a platter to you. it is time consuming, it will remain time consuming, and the government's hopefully efforts should be to try and encourage the judicial system to
I
resolve
hear
it.
your argument about the judicial system, and I think it makes sense. Justice Samjhauta is being delayed here for 8 years. Similarly, the 2611 is delayed there. And the two systems are almost identical in the way they hamper rather than lead to justice. But what about the manner in which the LET and Hafiz Saeed are treated? One is officially a proscribed organization. Hafiz Saeed has a bounty of $10 million on his head, and yet both are operating perfectly freely, and Hafiz Saeed, whenever he wants, rants and raves against India. And the Indian side says, and Mr. Modi in particular, how can we have meaningful talks when the sound that comes dominantly across the border is the voice of LET and Hafiz Saeed?
Listen, Karan, the sound that came from across the border in Pakistan during your election campaign was not particularly enamoring or encouraging. We ignored that sound, and it was done by leaders who have now become important people within your sort of domain, right? So what we have to see is, are we going to concentrate on the fringe minorities who clearly do not represent the most of Pakistan, not even 90% of Pakistan, and harp about it as significant people, or are we going to move forward with the job of normalizing things as much as possible?
I can understand why you look upon Hafiz Saeed and LET as fringe minorities or extremist minorities. What about another concern? There has been evidence given by David Headley, evidence in Adrian Levy's book, that elements of the ISI, either acting on behalf of the ISI or simply acting as rogues, were involved in the execution, planning and implementation of 2611. Names like Major Iqbal, Major Ali have come up. Is there any way a civilian government in Pakistan could actually tackle that, given that this leads straight to the ISI, to the army, and what is called the deep establishment? Is there any way a civilian government could tackle it? Or is this an area where the Indians have to be a lot more understanding of the nature of the Pakistani state?
No, I think the nature of the Pakistani state currently, as it is now, as it is evolving and developing, is not very different than the nature of the Indian state. And the role of the deep establishment within India is something that I had to, fortunately or unfortunately, come across directly during our times when we were trying to negotiate, for instance, on Siachen.
Who's the deep establishment in India?
No, the deep establishment in India is obviously your, the military and the intelligence
Except that our military never comes to power. Your military has ruled the country.
And for the last 2 times, you see, again, are we going to be hampered by the past? I mean, there is a reality of military rules in Pakistan which we are moving away from. I give you the case of a mature democracy in Pakistan by saying that in Pakistan today there is complete political consensus, even people like Imran Khan, who would rant about these visits and paint them in a negative way, would say that normalizing and peace with India is good for the country, right? So that is something that you do not see in India. And in India, what you see, if you would allow me, Karan, is a prime minister who meant very well, who had very good intentions, who had the intention of turning Siachen in the mountain of peace, for 10 years could not muster up the courage to come and visit Pakistan, to try and give us the opportunity to start doing business with each other. So that's the reality of India. In Pakistan, what you see is every opportunity that is given, whether it's Mohali to Prime Minister Yusuf Raza Gilani, whether it's Ajmer Sharif and a lunch with Manmohan Singh to President Zardari, whether it is the swearing-in ceremony of Mr. Modi to Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, we provide the enabling environment for our leaders to be able to interact. There is a difference on that count. Let's not ignore it. Let's grab the opportunity.
There are 2 important things embedded in that answer of yours. First, you feel genuinely let down by Dr. Manmohan Singh's weakness, or at least his inability to go to Pakistan. You feel that was a terrible mistake on his part.
I do. I truly do, because if you'd allow me, what is leadership? You know, we were always given reasons of the public opinion. I believe leadership requires you to lead and create positive public opinion.
And he failed to lead.
Not follow. And we did.
Dr. Manmohan Singh failed to lead.
Yes, I think on that one, yes, because he was bogged down by negative public opinion. I give you the example of normalization of trade relations with Pakistan. When we did it, it was not positive. The public opinion did not support it. But we did it, and then we created the circumstances for the public opinion to change for the better.
The second question is the great concern in India, that at the end of the day, civilian governments in Pakistan, particularly when it comes to relations with India, have to either take some sort of concurrence from the army chief, or at worst still, how far they can go is decided by the army chief. How do you convince people in India that is not the case? Because this is a view that's deeply held in this country.
I think this is a view which is not only deeply held in this country, in many countries around the world, right? And there's a reality to that view which comes from the history of Pakistan, where almost for half of our lives we've been led by dictators rather than civilian rules. I believe it is changing, and it has changed. I believe in not recognizing that change, and in keeping on asking these questions, you are further diminishing civilian, the perception
We've
of civilian.
become creatures of prejudice and habit, and that prejudice and habit won't let us see the changing reality of Pakistan.
Yes, and you said it, and I did not. Yeah.
My last question. One of the suggestions that Prime Minister Sharif discussed this time with journalists who he met before he met Mr. Modi, and I don't know if he brought it up with Mr. Modi, was that because Kashmir and terror are the two issues that matter to the two countries, maybe these should be elevated above the foreign secretary level talks or whatever new architecture they come up with, and handled together at a higher level, perhaps at the level of special representatives, possibly at the level of foreign ministers. Do you think that makes sense?
Karan, if I can go back to my experience and having gone through 2 rounds of composite dialogue or the resumed dialogue, when we sit as delegations on 2 sides, we are typically in the mood, and there's no enabling environment to be able to actually resolve those issues. It's stating and restating your old positions.
You go over and over the old ground.
You go over and over and over again, and then what do? You release fishermen at the end of the day, right? So, which is great. I mean, it's a great humanitarian gesture, but that is all that comes out of it. So really, it will require the 2 leaders and the leadership at large in both the countries to first get clarity in their minds that they do need to resolve it, and that they will not play politics, and that they will create the enabling environment to assist each other to resolve it. Because when you downplay Kashmir, you're not assisting me in being able to have a meaningful dialogue with you. So you recognize our problems, we recognize your problems, and believe me, terror today is not your problem. It is a primary problem of Pakistan.
So if the 2 leaders have to achieve that understanding, do they also have to discuss these 2 subjects at their level? Would that be the best solution? Get the 2 prime ministers together, get them to sit, get them to work out the answers, because only then will it filter down the system.
Yes, or through special representatives, or through whoever. That the architecture, I think, is not as important as the intention is. If the intention is there, in the 15-minute dialogue, for instance, that they had, which was one-on-one, 15 to 20 minutes, however many minutes it was. If they had agreed, I think it was too early to really reach that point, but if in a different setting, whether it is on the sidelines of the UNGA or another regional meeting, they agree that, okay, we will nominate these people to try and sort of find solutions that we can move forward on. And then, typically, India-Pakistan Prime Minister's level, there's so much hype and expectations created, and expectations of what you have said and what you haven't said, that it really takes away the pleasure of a meaningful
The conclusion we're coming to is that there are many ways forward, but it takes the intentions and the spirit of the 2 leaders to decide which of the many ways they're going to adopt, and then they have to not just adopt them, but pursue them with full sincerity.
Intentions for sure, a prerequisite, but strength of leadership to pursue whatever they believe to be
Strong leaders can find a solution if they're committed and determined to do so.
Absolutely.
A pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.